Kalaka Ma'at, coming at you live today. I have to make sure I'm showing up because I'm on a live stream on YouTube and on TikTok. And actually, I'm just checking to make sure it's all working. Give me a second here. Make sure I'm showing up because I can never figure out how to do. Yes, I'm on. And this is the what did we expect would happen? Voting rights, trauma, and something else I wrote on. I can't even see what's on my screen. I see them on the YouTube. Give me a second here. On the YouTube, I need some help. Oh, here it is. Never mind. Let me see what's going on with the TikTok. Why do I keep saying with the TikTok? I don't know what's happening here, if it even goes. Because I don't even see me on there doing anything. Sorry, y'all. It says I'm on, but I cannot be on. Give me a second here, y'all. Yeah, I don't think TikTok may be working. I'm not sure. But anyway, here I be. Hello, everyone. Hello. And I hope I'm not speaking too loud. Love lights. Welcome all, beautiful souls. Appreciate you being here. For those of you who are coming to the live stream live and for those who will see it later, thank you. Welcome all. Beautiful souls. I'm so glad to have the opportunity to be here. I really don't think I'm on TikTok, but I'm going to look one more time to see on my phone. Maybe the phone app is a little better because it didn't require me. It didn't require me to put anything in there. But no, I'm not seeing it. So I don't know what's happening here. So this can go bye-bye. I don't even know why it's on here. Sorry, y'all. It put me on two streams. I don't know how to get it off anyway, so I'll just stick with it. So welcome all. I'm coming on because I don't know why my screen's looking like that either. I'm coming on because let me see if I can change this theme. It is this. Let me see. Yeah, I like that better. See, I got it in red. Emergency. I'm coming on because, all this stuff happened with the Voting Rights Act, right? And, as somebody who deals in resonance, frequencies, vibrations, I mean, it really was an interesting sort of energetic situation, right? Growing up Jehovah's Witness, unfortunately, my family was not very active that I could see in any politics. Jehovah's Witnesses are prohibited from being politically active, from voting and all this stuff. So, I was never really present with political awareness for most of my life. And so, these things hit me differently also because, I've had a long experience dealing with racism, and I don't believe in microaggressions. All racism is bad racism. It's all egregious, shouldn't even be happening. It was a real big part of my life. I could, go through all of the times when a white person denigrated or believed they were denigrating me, which they actually did because I was wrapped up in all this system stuff and wondering why I wasn't accepted by these people. I didn't even think white. I was just like, yo, I know what I'm doing. I had the skills. What was the problem, right? But there have been some really interesting racist environments and people that I have interacted with and been within. So, this hit me a little differently. First of all, because of growing up not politically activated, but then becoming such over the years, and then having experienced racism, you know, and I had to sit in it for a minute. Like, what happened, right? I had to sit with it to discern. Am I just numb? I'm talking about people got to feel their emotions. You know, why isn't this? Why don't I feel some I mean, I used to be like that about racism, like all wound up and nuts, and just a struggle inside of myself that was just overwhelming. And so, and through my research, which was really focused on racism in healthcare, medical care, curriculums, and all this stuff, the first thing that came to me, which is the title of this, is what did you expect would happen? I don't know why this caption's not showing all the way. Let me see if I can do something else here to get this up here. Give me a second. Is that it? I'm gonna do it this way. Let's see what happens. And so that's what I thought. I'm like, what did people expect would happen? Let me see. There we go. My name came off, but that's all right. So my first thing was like my collective response. Like, what did we expect would happen, right? With racism, when I would talk about racist perceptions that I had, this person's doing this to me, that was white, this is happening, everything's racist. People would say to me, there is no racism. This was maybe like 3-4 years ago. Why do you keep talking about this? Racism isn't real. It doesn't even exist. And this was black and white and other people. And so I began to question myself. Am I just insanely perceiving reality, which I know I wasn't, but I questioned my own perception. Like, maybe there isn't anymore. Maybe I'm keeping it alive through my, my perception of reality. And then this happened. So I'm just like, I never really, after a while, I kind of like blew them off, like, those, what they said, because I just knew it was festering. It's always in our faces, whether we choose to see it or not. But festering, the real egregious, racist people and their white supremacist ideology. I would say white supremacy, that doesn't exist. I'm not excited this stuff is in people's faces now, but I am really overjoyed that people, our collective, has the capacity to see this. Like, those people who were like, get over it. Of course, they weren't necessarily always living in my melanated skin. Get over it. Get over it. And so for me, racism is an intense spiritual malady. Okay? And the idea that we expect some system somewhere to save us in the midst of all this is erroneous. Okay? Because if you saw my graphic for this live stream on the YouTube, now I put up the upcoming live streams on YouTube, but I still have not figured out how to connect Restream to the live, technology in YouTube. So, but there's like a man and his portraits behind him. And so I chose that because it reminded me of Dorian Gray. I don't know how many of you saw that movie, right? But it's an old black and white movie. I think it's color now. It's a movie. I grew up watching these black and white movies, believing that I could do everything in them, which was the first poor judgment that was not corrected in my youth. But he was doing all kind of stuff, right? Living a life that wasn't right. And in the attic, somebody had, painted his portrait. It was beautiful. He came home one day from just doing this mess, and he looked at the portrait and saw it was like kind of decayed. And he got kind of worried about it. I guess he figured out this was some sort of, mystical type phenomenon. So he put it in the attic. And he kept going out and doing things. And every once in a while, he would go up into the attic, and the picture would look grosser, worse, more decayed, boils, stuff dripping out, bugs crawling over it. That's what I thought when I heard this. It's like there's a face that folks want you to see. But when we go upstairs and we see that racism, it is putrid. And that's why it's a spiritual malady, because it decomposes people from the inside out, all over, because it's hate. And so, I wrote some stuff out. I was thinking about the idea of expectation. We got these expectations. I was thinking about my live stream I had on collective trauma, how, our systems reflect our trauma, our society, these things that we rely on reflect our collective trauma and the trauma of the people in charge of these systems. And then I thought about the program, the Power of Release program, the idea of, people are really up in arms about this. I mean, it makes sense that people would feel like this is the end. Everybody's giving the hope spin, in civil rights, they fought and fought and fought. And we had the rights after when the slaves were freed, and then Jim Crow came and they rolled back the rights, and then we got them again. And so this is happening, and we can fight for them again. But for God freaking sake, y'all, really? Fight for them again? So that they can be destroyed again? I mean, the most enlightening component of what is happening in the White House and with our politics right now is that we see that nothing we thought was guaranteed is guaranteed in this 3D reality. Things have been rolled back, taken away. Monies, Medicaid, Medicare, healthcare, food stamps, private insurance, sky high, the voting rights, abortions, like women's reproductive health care. They're even giving immunity to Bayer, who has this disgusting pesticide called Roundup with glyphosate in it, which causes cancer. They are being sued by so many thousands of people, and there's an executive order saying to Bayer, make more Roundup, make more glyphosate, and to give them immunity from their lawsuits. Whew. So the people who've gotten cancer directly from their exposure to this have no way to get into solvency with the harm that they've suffered. So if anything, the veil of goodness, compassion, empathy that everybody always wants to, we're in the white. None of that, not one piece of that is real. And we talk about illusion in this societal reality, this 3D thing. It's an illusion. On one end, it's all sort of chemicals, reactions, and physics, and how the atoms come together and form molecules, and why things feel like mass. And, like they're heavy, they have some sort of consistency, when in reality, it's all energy. So that's a level of illusion. because we think all this is real. We think our bodies are hard when we are pure energy. But there's also an illusion where we're being told all these things that we have fought for are policy, laws. And the illusion was we believed in this stuff, and it's just taken away. Just like that. Now it's reverse racism. It's Louisiana. As soon as they got this verdict from the Supreme Court, they made 2 Black districts in Louisiana. And now they're saying that these districts were made because of race. And that's against the law. So now they want to get rid of these districts and get rid of the representatives, because now that's racism, when indeed it was clearly a poorly laid Band-Aid. So there's nothing real here. So what did we expect would happen? What truly did we expect would happen in this American society when white supremacy and racism runs rampant and has now coalesced into a concerted frequency to wake us all the hell up? I know I'm a little bit passionate right now because I'm still saying, what did we expect? And now we expect these very systems that are spiritually ill to save us, to fix this. You know, I had wrote some notes, which I'm going to go into my notes that I have here that I prepared for this live stream. But I had wrote these notes down as a download. And I say my downloads are spiritual downloads because they come in, I write them down. I mean, I'm not really thinking about this stuff, but these thoughts come to me. And of course, anybody can say whatever they want about what they are. You know, I believe what they are because I'm in this body. Okay. And so I was writing some stuff like, you know, what did y'all expect would happen when we lose our addiction to what we expect? We all have expectations, and that is the death of anything real, authentic, clearly being seen. These expectations, right? And it's an addiction to them because it's like folks cannot live without having an expectation about what something's supposed to do, somebody's supposed to do, how this is supposed to care for us, how these are supposed to work for us. An expectation to what we expect. When we lose that addiction, you know, because that addiction disconnects us from what is really happening, you know, and I talk about this with my clients. You know, they're in a relationship and then they're like, well, it'll get better, the expectation. I just wish it would go back. You know, we talked about going back to the way things were, expectation. And what's happening in reality? There's no expectation on what's happening here. I'm talking about my clients right now. The expectation about, you know, how to fix what's here now is not there. It's all about something else. But that expectation disconnects us from what's actually happening. So I wrote the question. So what is actually happening? And I'm going to get into my script in a minute. We thought we were safe. Documented policies. We thought there were documented policies that were guardrails, representatives that actually had power, and getting outside en masse, or even in whichever way possible to protest across this land. And we expect to be saved from the entities facilitating the societal wake the fuck up call. Government is a projection of how we see ourselves. This whole society is a projection of who we are as a people and how we believe or expect people to care for us in these positions of power, when in fact, all this new administration is doing is pulling back the veil. This stuff has been going on forever. It's just now we're being told explicitly, clearly what is happening, even though the language is played around with in some shifting demeanor to have people think that these things were all put in because of race. And they were, but somehow this is no longer real because it's unfairly servicing Black folks. A reflection, I'm going to say, of many of us, all of us. I mean, I think we all went to sleep at the wheel. And so over the years, we have become more a picture of Dorian Gray decaying into nothingness. I mean, he eventually died, of course, because he was living a crazy, crazy time life. All right. And so I'm going to get into what I'm here to talk about. And the thing that I really want to, again, I asked the question from my download, but the reality is, you know, and this question is harsh, I do not mean it carelessly, even though I said it several times. Really, what did we expect would happen? With the spiritual malady of racism never, ever being addressed or have safeguards around in this society. Okay? Now, and this is not about, again, like I said about my clients, what the hopes are. This is not about what we hope would happen, and not what we did want to believe would happen. You know, I'm asking something deeper right here, okay? What did we expect would happen after generation upon generation of this country hiding? It's not even hiding, but through silence, hiding its racial violence, softening its language, taking the term domination and calling it law and order, calling exclusion procedure, right? And calling abandonment states' rights. And then calling the erosion of protection constitutional interpretation. I mean, for God's sake, the Constitution ain't what the paper is written on. I mean, if it was really something real, something guarded, something bounded, something protected, this would not be happening right now. And I know I might get all slapped around talking about the Constitution ain't worth the paper it's written on, but we see it is not. At some point, y'all, what lives in the addict does not stay in the addict. It can grow, it can take a shape, it can gather force, power, and then one day it walks downstairs and sits at the table as if it owns the house. And we think that white supremacy owns the house because it is a bad, bad baby. And it has mutated forms, reproduced itself in different ways until it got to this point where it is now undeniable. It has walked down the steps in its most ugliest fashion. So that is where we are. That is what's happening in the here and now. Okay. And so the gutting of the Voting Rights Act is not only a legal crisis, as I mentioned before, you know, it's a spiritual crisis because it reveals a profound mis-attunement between what people thought this country had become and what this country continues to carry. And the misattunement I talk a lot about in a live stream where I was talking about this emotional misattunement and how it impacts our spiritual journey or progress on our spiritual journey and can fundamentally impact the realness of a spiritual awakening. And so many people in this society believed documented policies were guardrails, right? We believe that these civil rights laws, court decisions, and elected officials, as I said in my little download text, that they're going to hold the line. And, we believe that if enough people protested, organized, testified, marched, posted, donated, voted, and warned, right, then these institutions would eventually correct themselves. That, of course, that belief made sense on one level. And we all start somewhere, right? I mean, even though I wasn't political growing up, I believed that, the government was self-correcting. That was in my, phase of ignorance, right? Little did I find out later that it just reproduced racism in different ways, shapes, or form. And the most fundamental is the way in which racism lives in policies, which keeps racism alive in this society. Okay, so we're all impacted by the spiritual malady. It all weighs on us and exhausts us and burns us out. And then for those folks who just don't know or see, was really, I don't know what the big problem is. These are those people who are, ambivalent, but they do nothing about anything that's happening because, as many people know, privilege likes privilege. I mean, if I was white, what would I do? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I would be different because, my melanin gives me stuff that perhaps it doesn't translate into being white. But, maybe I will protect my power and privilege, my capacity to get a job without really having the best skills, right? Not saying all white folks are like this, but I mean, if I had a leg up, I don't know, maybe I want to keep it. So look, I'm not faulting anybody. I'm just speaking truth to power. That's it. And so it made sense on one level to believe in these systems, these institutions, because we need to have faith in something, in shared structures, shared narratives about how things work, to live inside this society. But when faith becomes dependency, we expect something to save us. And dependency becomes denial. Oh, I'm not really going to worry about it. So this will fix itself. It's not as bad as it seems. We stop seeing what is happening in this moment in time. And, I keep going back to the fact that the Voting Rights Act, when it was put into motion the second time, in 1965, can you believe that? 2 years before I was born. And Jim Crow had just been, dealt with a few years prior to that. My sister was born during Jim Crow, or as it was being phased out. I don't think it ever was phased out, Jim Crow. It's just reproduced itself in different ways. But, that's pretty powerful, right? That it just happened 2 years before I was born. And now for many of us, Generation X, we're seeing this just go away. There's a spiritual sickness in this society. And so this is the danger of expectation, right? Expectation, like I said, is a kind of addiction. We don't even think about our expectations. They just are. You expect a woman to act this way, a man to act this way, a gay person to act this way. You expect, if you do something for somebody, you expect them to do something else back or reciprocal. I mean, we have all these these expectations. It's an addiction. I was thinking about expectation. I was trying to roll it around with stereotype. Expectations are attached to stereotypes, these frameworks we use to understand our 3D reality. Okay? And stereotypes can be really bad, but the stereotype is actually a framework for understanding what to do or to be in a situation, right? They guide us into knowing how to behave when we go to church, or when we go to the supermarket, right? Or when we, have an interview, right? When we're talking to somebody who's older than us, what? Stereotypes don't work that way anymore. Poor folks, old folks go to the door, and the young person could be behind and won't even open the door. I'm old school. But anyway, it's an addiction. We have expectations for everything tied to stereotypes. Okay. And it keeps us attached from the version of reality we were promised. Where were we at recently before everything was upended? We were going in a direction that seemed to be trying to really work hard to build a society where everybody could exist and do and be and thrive. Now, for me, I'm a racial realist. I never thought racism would go away, right? But we were headed in a direction where there was a greater sense of freedom from those that were in bondage or oppressed. Now that's completely out the water based on what we're seeing, right? And so we're attached to the version of reality that we were promised instead of the reality unfolding in front of us right here and now. And I talked about this with emotions in my last live stream, because there are a whole bunch of things that can, in our emotions, we don't necessarily know even what we're feeling. That's why for me, I got to sit down and register what's happening with me. Like what am I actually feeling about this? And it's not what you hope to feel. It's like what you feel here and now. And so, we think about the courts, like the Supreme Court. We thought would protect our rights when nothing could be further from the truth. We were taught that's where justice is refined, and everybody's talking about the justice system is protecting us. The justice system is dealing with all the bad stuff that's happening in our politics right now. I don't see anybody arrested, put in jail, sued. I'm not seeing any of that. I'm just seeing stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it. And then the stop it turns into something more egregious. Stop it. Then the stop it turns into something more egregious. So I don't know if anything is actually saving us at this moment in time. We expect the people that we put in office, right, to represent, because we were told that democracy responds to public will. Are we really in a democracy? I did talk about that in my last, check-in, carpoolers chat. We throw all these words around, but what the hell does democracy actually mean? What is the definition of democracy? Now, I have my own in my head, but I'm going to look it up. I'm going to look it up in particularly in relation to American democracy, because that may be a different definition than other so-called democracy. We elect our representatives who represent their views. You see who's in office now, right? Constitutional limits, government power, and the Bill of Rights protects our freedom and limits government's power. That's a bunch of BS. System relies on a rule of law, peaceful transfer of power, and loyal opposition. I don't know what's happening with the loyal opposition or the rule of law. Checks and balances doesn't even exist anymore. Active participation. We participate as citizens, holding officials accountable, and at the state, local levels using initiatives, and we're in a representative democracy. And so it doesn't exist. American democracy no longer exists. Everything I read to you does not exist. Maybe for the Democrats trying to do something, who knows what they're doing, right? I mean, this is all like, what the hell's going on? It's like an avalanche. They've always been a little strange and passive, and I don't know what. I mean, from what I understand, that they are part of the elite that want to maintain some sense of power, so they don't do everything that needs to be done because it would mess them up. Everybody's spiritually sick. But there's nothing representative about the democracy we have now. Nothing. So, and from my perspective, I never believed we were a democratic society anyway, because when we talk about the government, these is representative of the people. I mean, look, voting rights 65, and then the people in office even after that. Why do we still have racism? Why are all these ills and things happening? Nobody was representing Black folks, really. So I never truly ever believed or had faith in a representative government. I mean, I voted for the best candidate knowing that they all got issues, but understanding that racism is here and that it's just, again, reproduced with each new generation, representative government. I just read what a democracy is. I'm going to say it one more time. None of those things are operative right here and now. So if we're not an operative democracy, a representative democracy, then what is happening here? People call it fascism, whatever that is, just it's bad. But it is a severe spiritual malady that's happening here. A lack of empathy, a lack of compassion, a lack of just understanding, and a lack of actually seeing what is actually happening in the moment. Purposefully, not out of ignorance, and that might not even be like purposeful ignorance, but it's not even lack of ignorance. And so, as I mentioned earlier, what the establishment is supposed to come and save us, rescue us, because it will self-correct. We already knew what was happening before when something like this government happened, 10 years ago. We already knew, but there were no safeguards. Nobody cared. As a matter of fact, it was just left to go. That Dorian Gray that walked down the steps. We just said, go, do what you want. This is free speech. You can be and lie. Can you imagine the energy, that low frequency that a person takes on to just spew lies? Blackness inside. Just cognitive distortion. Seriously. It's not only a spiritual malady, I say it's a mental health illness. Because the disconnect is so, the gulf, the gap is so huge. And the other people over here, they're suffering, not a care in the world. For me, it moves beyond just a spiritual malady. It is spiritual malady. It's a co-occurring disorder, a spiritual malady with mental health issues. And they always stay away from racism as a psychological issue or a psychiatric issue. But I think it really is, because it's like it's so embedded within certain people that they would rather burn down a house just to stay in power or to have power back than to do something something else. Burn it down, destroy it all, just so we don't have them folks over here. Now, there's nothing spiritual about that. I ain't even talking religious. I'm not even going there. But talk about a spirit, a soul. soulless. And so, when these same systems that we expect to do things for us, you know, when they actually are part of the harm, then we feel stunned, betrayed, and disoriented. I'm listening to some commentaries on YouTube. I may be a resonance healer, a spiritual transformer, a guide, but I am living in this 3D reality with y'all, and I understand the hardships, and I cannot fly above the fray because it needs folks like us to sit in it and make sense of this through a spiritual lens, because there's none of that really. I mean, there's the church, but that's in the Bible, and I don't believe that book is supportive of people who are actually not white or Jewish. I don't know what that's about. I mean, I used to believe in it hands down. I thought Jonah was living in that whale. I mean, I had psyched myself out. The flood, man, yo. I mean, these things could have happened. It could have been a massive flood. There are tidal waves, There's all kind of stuff. But come on, y'all. And so disorientation is not just, we can't just call it disappointment or political disappointment. No, it's a little bit more than that. It is aligned with what I discussed. It is a mis-attunement. And so misattunement happens when the signal we are receiving from our three-dimensional reality does not match the story we have been living by. Okay. So in personal relationships, misattunement happens when a person keeps saying, I care about you, right? While their behavior is not aligned at all. Their behaviors keep recreating violence, harm, right? And over time, the body starts to register the contradiction, that misattunement, and the nervous system picks up what the mind is trying to excuse that behavior, because we may keep telling ourselves, oh, this person means well. Oh, it's okay. They're just having a bad day. But in saying that, you have a tenseness in your body and you feel a little verklempt or short of breath, and then your clarity is like, I really don't know what's going on. But your spirit knows that something is fundamentally wrong. This individual. And the same thing happens collectively, right? The nation can say freedom while restricting access to power, which is happening right now, right? The government can say equal protection while narrowing the routes through which inequality can be challenged, like getting rid of those black districts in Louisiana. There's no equal protection if people don't have representatives. If we're still believing in a representative democracy, which is never really representative of all people in the first place. Leaders can say democracy while making participation in it harder for the communities that have historically been excluded from it, right? At some point, y'all, the gap between the words and the reality becomes traumatic. For many, this stripping away the Voting Rights Act is traumatic because many people fought. People died, sacrificed their life to have this Voting Rights Act written into law. And we know this harm is not new, but the illusion of this being a representative democracy can no longer carry the weight of what we're seeing with our eyes. What we're seeing with our eyes in the here and the now. And I gotta keep saying the here and the now because people live in fantasy land. They live in, it'll get better. They live in the past as we're seeing now. Like there's like diametrically opposed visions. And that's illusionary. That is illusory. That is a mis-attunement. Believing in this illusion of this society, that it is actually there for us. It's there for some. And, I can tell a lot of people are exhausted now. Like I said, when I heard what happened, I was on YouTube just looking at various different newscasts, individuals who like podcasters, regular folks talking about it. People are just like flabbergasted. And those who are not have either removed themselves from any attention to what's happening here or want it, or are like me. It never was representative in the first place, right? I'm not exhausted. I'm just like, yo, all y'all need to wake up, right? So there's an exhaustion now. And that exhaustion is not only about one court decision, right? It really isn't. Or one law, or one political party, or one election cycle. It is the exhaustion of watching the same wound reopen under a new language. Like I said, the Band-Aid was put on wrong. Maybe it has some water on it, or some grease, some Vaseline was on skin. Right? I mean, really, this is absolutely absurd that this even happened. It is just, it makes sense, but it's just like, whoa. Wow. Really? You got to read the opinion that Justice Alito wrote. This man does not have a soul, and his technical gymnastics in these legalese terms is just astoundingly just disturbing. So not only are folks doing those mental gymnastics, that cognitive dissonance to have racism, because you got to have cognitive dissonance to be racist, okay? But there's some sort of like interpretive, like looking at the law and then finding out a new way to talk about it using its language, but in a way that's backwards. I mean, if that's not cognitive gymnastics. And maybe that is cognitive dissonance. I didn't think about that on any level with this because it's such a given with racist. And the people who believe, oh, it'll get better, then that's got to be some sort of cognitive dissonance there, or distortion. You've been saying it'll get better for years, and it's gotten worse right now. Okay? And so, this fatigue is really tied to realizing what some people call progress, right? Some people really believe in this progress tied to government. All of this equal right. I don't know if it's equal rights amendment. Look, I'm not a political person at all. So I'm not going to get into all I'm not a political person understanding all the terminology, but, people call it progress. These laws, affirmative action, the DEI policies. I never was a fan for DEI policies. They were just a bunch of BS to me. Maybe it worked in certain settings, but the setting I was in, it was just a word salad and fake. Okay? Read my book, Ivory Tower Hypocrisy. We learn a lot about DEI. Okay? And so, we called it progress. And racism was never released. The spiritual malady where people have no souls, soulless beings. Racists are soulless. Let's be really frank about this. People who support white supremacy are soulless beings. If that is not a profound, acute, and chronic spiritual malady, I don't know what is. Because racism did not go away with this progress. It was managed. Racism was managed until it imploded and the top blew off and out poured all these sick, soulless people. That could now just be their sick, soulless racist in all its glory. And you know, yeah, racism is really bad. I'm not even going to act like spirituality or spiritual awakening changes that. We just understand it in a different way. The vibrations of it, the low frequency of it, its resonance is just way off with any, it's just it's just an artificial resonance because racism is an artificial type of thing. It's created, right? So the racist resonance is cancerous. It's sick. And so racism, like I said, it was reproduced in policy language. These redistricting maps, I can't even talk. Redistricting maps. Institutional politeness. And legal arguments, like I just talked about with Alito and his word salad legalese, that make exclusion sound real technical rather than violent. And racism is violent. And so people that practice or who are racist, and even those who say I'm not racist, but interact with racists and don't do anything about racism, they're sick as well. And so, and these soulless beings affirm, support, live racism, which is extremely violent. Now, people think violence has to be physical. No. Because actually, domestic abuse also includes manipulation and emotional abuse. Okay? And so, and that's violent. That is abuse. And it's violent when this exclusion challenges the health and safety and well-being of people, restricts their capacity to have jobs and buy things and live and thrive, or just make it basic needs. This is violence. Not only, abuse in that way, but it is spiritual violence, because do you understand what happens to people when they are oppressed by racism? And for me, it was very real and salient and in my body. But it is a downer. It is. It's like a cloud. I love all weather, but it's like a dark gray crowd. I can't even talk. Cloud with a steady stream of cold rain, but not like plump, 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 but like that weird small rain. It's like just dust you all the time, right? And every so often there's a thunderbolt or a lightning strike that comes out of it, which is when you experience it like, whoo, damn, I can't believe they did that, right? But racism is like a dark cloud that not only hangs over people who are within the capture of racism, like blacks and other black or brown people. Excuse me, give me a second. I'm sorry, my dad's in the hospital. This might be calling about that. I need to take it. But so racism it just follows people who are black or brown. And right now it's killing people. Right now they got them in concentration camps. And and that's allowed. I'm silent because It's just so outrageous. And then we expect this system to correct itself or save us from the system? I don't think so. Give me a second. I can't even write. Um, so yeah. And so, and all this brings me to the image that I told you about, that I was thinking about during this whole download. And that's the movie, The Picture of Dorian Gray. If you haven't seen it, you should check it out. Okay. In that story, the public face remains polished while the hidden portrait absorbs the decay. And so, in one way, to understand the American spirit, that is one way to understand the American spiritual malady publicly. We wanted to see ourselves as evolved, reasonable, democratic, inclusive, and morally advanced. Can you believe that? Morally advanced. And privately, the portrait has been carrying the truth. The racism, greed, domination, indifference, and fear that were never fully transformed kept collecting in the background. And it didn't disappear because people stopped using the blunt language of the past. And we know that N-word. They adapted, right? These folks became adaptable. The language got adaptable, became more respectable by some. And it learned to wear a suit, and it learned to speak in legal terms. And we are seeing this decay alive in soulless orbs of energy. But you know what? This is all supposed to happen because we are in an age that we're supposed to question these things. And a lot of people are just still sleeping, which is okay. We all wake up at our time. But if you are not having a question about the capacity of this government to truly do anything sustainable in the society, you are living in a dream world because the government is not sustaining anything. Nothing is sustainable. We didn't know this when these things came into being. I'm believing things are changing like everybody else. Although when it happened, I wasn't surprised. But you got look. In my spiritual journey, I have released a lot of the accoutrements of this society because they've never served me. My resonance was misaligned through belief and faith. Even though I knew it was rancid, there was still an attachment to it. But in the spiritual journey, I've understood that I need not rely for my worth and safety, care and concern on some institution that doesn't represent me in any way, shape, or fashion. Yes, it's nice to have a safety net. Yes, it's nice to have Social Security as long as it lasts. Right now, it's missing billions of dollars and may run out by 2030. I mean, do we all know the stuff that's happening, right? But I'm not relying on any of that because I have faith in what is unfolding for me because my faith is in a higher place, the divine intelligence, the cosmic consciousness. And it exists in frequencies and vibrations. I'm not going to say I don't need a hospital or an ambulance, or I don't need a police officer if something happens. Yes. But my resonance is not aligned with these tools because I understand that police could come and shoot me dead just because I'm a Black woman, right? And people may have a bad day. I just, And that's not expecting the worst. That's just what this 3D reality displays and shows. And so this portrait has walked down the metaphorical steps and into our society in the form of soulless beings, and now in the form of actual law. Which actual law, really? I mean, look, that's why my tether to all this is very loose. And this is where the idea of release becomes important, right? This misattunement, this attachment, expectations. In my work, like I said, I do not pretend that harm doesn't exist, because it does, and it's real. And I'm not the type of person in this spiritual walk where it's all about what's spiritual, not about what's actually happening in this 3D reality. Look, that would undermine my whole MO, right? I can't just throw away what I've experienced, understand. Yes, I see it differently, but I'm still here. And so release is not to bypass any political responsibility or any rage that we feel, what's going on. It's a disciplined act of letting go of the illusion that keeps us from responding clearly. And I think at this point, we could keep hoping and expecting, but I think we need to release the belief that somebody is coming to save us. Everybody's talking about the election. The election. First of all, that's just energy, vibrations, function in air. Election, or election. Are you really situating yourself in the expectation that we will even have an election? I mean, we got to be real. What is happening here now actually provides a real consequence that it will not happen. And so, to respond clearly with that in mind, what would I do? What are we doing to safeguard ourselves if it doesn't happen? What are these so-called representative folks in office doing to ensure that it doesn't happen? As far as I know, we'll see. That's why you can't stay, you can't hold this hope, this expectation right now. Like surviving through it, because it has shown us in every way that it is no longer there. So what are we actually clutching? What's in our fist? What is actually in your hand that you're clutching onto when right here and now is screaming? And I did a whole thing on looking at behavior, not what people say, but what they do. People are always talking about talk is cheap, action. Well, now we're seeing the action. And the action is saying there are no safeguards. So you keep clutching in survival mode onto stuff that has just like sand just fallen out of your hands. The illusion has turned granular and it is falling fast. I believe it has just dropped and we're just holding on to air. And so sometimes we also have to release the belief, like I said, that someone is coming here to do something. right? And the fantasy that institutions become ethical simply because they are old, formal, or powerful. That is a big fantasy. Ethical, moral. These terms take on more substance for folks existing in this realm of morality and ethical behavior. But then I discuss how, believing your morality is all that moral certainty can also cut off flexibility in how we think and our capacity to respond. And also there is a contradiction, oxymoronic tinge to the idea of ethical as attached to old, formal, or powerful. Because what's old, what's formal, and powerful is the reproduction of structural racism in all of our institutions. And so we must release the emotional attachment to being shocked by what has been clearly visible forever. Shock has its place, but shock cannot be our permanent spiritual posture. And we can't say, God save us. Because I'm sure the slaves prayed that every night. And we can say, oh, well, we prayed and it finally happened. Oh. You believe what you want to believe. All our beliefs are valid because they help construct the world that we want to live in, our individual reality. And sometimes that reality is just so disconnected from what is actually happening in this 3D world. And so if we stay in a shocked posture, we remain suspended, right? It's suspended animation. We keep asking, how could this happen? How could this happen? How could this happen? How could this happen? I can't believe this happened. How could it happen? The more useful question, beautiful souls, is what has been happening that I did not fully want to see. Now that question is harder because it returns power to the body. It returns energy back to our orb. It brings us out of the spectacle. When I was in undergrad, we read about the spectacle by this, I don't know whether he was American or not, but this philosopher guy, Debord. I was really into the spectacle. And we got the spectacle all right. But it brings us out of that spectacle, out of these worlds we live in, like me listening to these YouTube videos, not because my reality is contingent on it, but because I wanted to siphon, I wanted to go through the information environment. But people exist in the spectacle, in the weird social media things that tell them, that speak death to them. But they're spectacle because they feed their soulless being. Or because, they're always trying to catch something that's hope or faith is attached to. But it's all spectacle because it's artificial coming from out there. So we need to come out of the spectacle and back to the body and into discernment. In the power beliefs framework, the first phase is recognize. And recognition asks us to stop negotiating with the truth. Now I say the truth because people say, what truth? When I was coming up, in college and afterwards, there's a big T truth and a little T truth. Well, there are no big T truths. They're all little T truths. Everybody has them. We can go round and around and around and around. but we can see all together objectively what is happening. Now we can color that with our perception, of course, which is going to, everybody's different. Our perceptions are different, so we're going to take it up different and differently interpret it. But we can actually see that happened. So there is some truth. Behavior, action speaks truth because we can see it. Now, how we interpret it is something else. And it's not our goal right now to become cynical, because I was cynical for a long time. I know many of us can sit in cynicism. But cynicism is not clarity. Cynicism is often wounded. It's a wounded expectation, pretending to be wisdom. Like I said, I didn't expect it to ever be representative of me. That could be seen as cynical, pretending to be wisdom, right? It could be interpreted as that. But for me, it's a true rendering of the history and, of all this stuff, not even here in America, but the world history, African-American history, white people history. It just all makes sense. And the wisdom is that I survived, right? Many people of color survive and thrive while still faced with abject, egregious, violent racism. So recognition says, I am willing to see the pattern. I'm willing to see the pattern. The pattern is rights without power are vulnerable. That's been happening for hundreds of years here. Policies without protection are vulnerable. Constitution doesn't mean anything, clearly. Here and now means nothing. Keep talking about it like it does. It doesn't. Policies that were overturned without protection are vulnerable. This is truth. Representation without accountability is vulnerable. And a democracy that depends on the moral, ethical restraint of people committed to domination, subjugation, oppression is vulnerable. So we got to recognize what is actually going on here, but not recognize it in a way that is depressing and sad. Yes, we can live in that space for a minute, but we have to see the actors behind this. We see the behavior. And we have to understand that this stuff is occurring. It was supported by soulless beings, and it's being supported by soulless beings in these places, these halls of power called government. Now, people can become not soulless, but what is not having a soul? I mean, I'm on this definition, say, what is the definition of soulless? It describes a person or a place or even a thing that lacks human warmth, emotion, sensitivity, or character. It often implies something is mechanical, cold, heartless. The term is used to describe emotionless people and uninviting environments. I believe these are soulless people, supported by soulless people in America. Many, 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 many. Millions of them. And so after we can recognize what is happening here, because nobody has to sit feeling all tight and constricted. Although words are easy, words are easy. in theory. All this recognition is in theory, right? But recognizing the pattern is important because we don't recognize patterns that no longer serve some of us. It's hard to release what's being carried in those patterns. And so that brings us to the release. Release means letting go of stories that keep us passive. Okay. I can go on and on about that. But we may release the story that is being informed, that's being informed. Wait, we may need to release the story that being informed in the same way. Oh, we need to release the story. In the way it's situated within us, at the same time, the way it's being organized in this 3D reality and in our emotions. We may need to release the story that outrage alone is a strategy. Like I'm saying, we get out and protest en masse. What's happened? Oh, well, we need 7/10 of American society to come out and protest before something changes. And that's the strategy that we keep doing. Many countries do this over and over again, but for God's sake, aren't we supposed to be exceptional? Are we supposed to be like the what's the Camelot on the hill, shining city on the hill? We just as broke. We just broke with these Dorian Gray soulless people. I mean, the decayed Dorian Gray operating around here, telling us the story, and we get mad about it. Outrage is not release. As a matter of fact, it's more constriction. That's why, when we do a spiritual journey and spiritual awakening, we don't sit. We may ascertain and come to grips with what we are emoting, what we're feeling. But it's not to the point, even if it's outrage, we can sit in it, discern it, understand where it is. Find words, like what? Threatened. Outrage is anger for being threatened, right? We call it specifically what it is. But that ain't enough, right? And look, we may need to release the story that spiritual people should remain above politics, which that has not happened in religion, but is that spiritual or is that doctrine? So, spiritual folks should remain above politics as if the struggle over whose voice counts is not also a struggle over whose humanity is recognized. Oh, that's deep. Spirituality that cannot look at power is not deep. It's decorative. So we need to look at it. See what emotions we have to it. And so not to repeat the patterns and to understand our own pattern in affirming or supporting these soulless beings' efforts we have to see what we're actually feeling and discern the reality. And I did the live stream I did that started talking about emotional intelligence has a feelings wheel. They're all over the internet. Dig into what you're feeling right now, so you can figure out how to release it. And whatever pattern you're sitting in that's feeding this passively may need to be adjusted. And the third phase is reframe. Reframe asks us to move from helpless interpretation into conscious alignment, right? And so if government is in some way a projection of how we see ourselves, then we must examine what we have normalized. And we have normalized racism. We've normalized white supremacy because nobody has done anything about it. As a matter of fact, everybody keeps saying, oh, it doesn't exist. Until the decayed Dorian Gray portrait walks down the steps. Have we normalized disconnection? Because that's what's happening now. Soulless beings are disconnected from any empathy, compassion. And there are people who support them like fervently. And then there are those who support in their passivity. And there are those who support it in their ignorance. So what have we normalized in this disconnection? Because we are living that way already. Look at us. I'm living in this neighborhood, closed community, sort of, kind of. Neighbors, I mean, we don't even talk to each other. There's some, but there's no neighborhood or community here, really. Even when I lived in apartment buildings, people never even said hi to each other. Disconnection. When I walk down the street, I always make it a point to say hi. People won't even say it back. Have we normalized a lack of compassion and uncaringness? Have we normalized watching harm at a distance? I think so. Because we move people into a certain neighborhood and whatever happens to them happens as long as it's not here. And we watch it on the news, which is spinning it whatever way they want to spin it. Have we normalized believing that power belongs somewhere else? Like in the hands of these soulless beings? Because this is the way it's been forever. This is not the first soulless beings. We've normalized it because we've done nothing about it. White supremacy. We keep talking about racism being reproduced, but so has white supremacy. It's been reproduced until now. It's just back. But in a much more greedy, horrific, killing people way. Because watching it at a distance, but now it's in front of us. That power belongs in white folks. I mean, look at what the Congress looks like. They're predominantly white men. Many of our state governments, same way. Only gets colorful when we go into more local offices, perhaps. And have we mistaken individual survival for collective freedom? Everybody's off in their spaces surviving, doing what they need to do for them and their families, that is critically important. But is that actually collective freedom? Because you have the capacity to do that. Others may not. These are questions. I'm not trying to shame anyone because that's one of the worst feelings somebody can have. These questions are meant to bring us back into relationship with our own agency. And right now, the planetary shifts, the astrological phenomena that is happening is putting us in a place where these societal shifts had to take place. Because it's like either you're going to wake up now or never. And as a spiritual being, in this work, we know that we are in a period of ascending spiritually. At the same time, we are accosted by soulless beings to just grind us into nothingness. It's very interesting, but this is all supposed to happen. And in the process, we're supposed to see this and ascend because it's like a butterfly. We're in a chrysalis, like some gross soup. We've always been in that. Right? And it is emerging as some decrepit butterfly, but I mean, really, we got to see things, understand this, so that we can emerge out of this chrysalis, this collective chrysalis, with new eyes and a new commitment. But I do not expect, I had no expectation about any of that occurring, because people will be people. And there is no wrong decision people make for their survival. But is that survival just for certain groups of people and not collectively? That is where the issue comes in. And we could even say, is America supposed to be a collective society? I mean, I don't know where I would go if I was going. I mean, come on now. I'm just saying that. Is it really? Look, the Civil War was fought to free slaves from slavery, to topple the governments down south that were, wholehearted support of brutalizing Black people and making money off of their labor, and to bring equity in some fashion form along with the Voting Rights Act, right? But that was later. But yes, and there were Black folks out of slavery who did go into government, and then Jim Crow came and pushed everybody out. However, I'm losing my point. But we never really did anything. I mean, the Civil War was fought. People died. Black people died. White people died. I'm not getting connected with all this stuff like emotionally. I'm just saying, behaviorally, people were killed to move forward the understanding of some sort of equity, which never was. I mean, don't get me into all of the issues that being enslaved perpetuated after the fact, not just with policy, but just in people's capacities and abilities. I'm not saying Black folks are not phenomenally talented. I'm just saying we came out of slavery sick as hell. We had nowhere to sleep. We were sleeping in toxic places, in barns and weird places, because we had nowhere to go. So health disparities, it was already a disparity. And then as the medical industry was already anti-Black, these disparities just got worse. So there was nothing really won in any civil war other than a collective economic environment where one side of the country was not making money off of human beings. But those people, those folks, those Confederates, they didn't even go to sleep. They just infiltrated. And people that supported that way of being just were in this world. I mean, I was like, when MAGA came up, I was like, oh my God, I probably work with some of these people who hate Black people. Everybody talk about racism doesn't exist or microaggressions. No, I work with maggots. Not maggots like the worms, but MAGGATS. I worked with maggots who smiled at me. Talk about a spiritual malady. That's some sick shit. But anyway, the veil went off. They're revealed. Everything is out in the open, right? And so we need to be brought back into relationship with our own agency. We have given away self-sovereignty. We've given over control over ourselves. All we care about is our means to an end. We need to bring it back with our own agency. That's a big ask, because people don't even know what self-sovereignty is. A lot of this stuff isn't understandable. People have to get engaged to understand that they have agency and that they can actually be self-sovereign. Because it's not really conceivable for some people, a lot of people. Well, they speak agency. Their agency is resonating with a 3D reality They could care less about them, right? You got agency inside of a lie. Nothing about this is real, as we see now. And so collective trauma, all of this really teaches us how to brace, how to become more freeze, flight, or fight, right? Stress, nervous system. You know, there's an expectation for many people of loss. And just absorb the betrayal, and keep functioning. That's how it's been, particularly with people of color, particularly Black people. And all people, because look, other folks want to do something, but this stuff just seems so overwhelmingly huge. It's like, oh my God, I can see. Oh my God, what can I do? I get that. But being able to function in this lie that is actually now revealed for what it is not freedom. You know, a traumatized collective, and I talk about this in another live stream, can still go to work, pay bills, attend meetings, buy stuff, and speak politely, you know, while carrying a deep spiritual wound. And that wound becomes more dangerous when it is unnamed, because unnamed pain looks for somewhere to go. And that could be numbness, right? Could be just mad and not know where to direct that at, right? Despair. And it could be spiritual withdrawal that is under the guise of peace. I just want peace. Yeah. This is why misattunement matters. When society is misattuned, people lose the ability to accurately read danger. Some overreact to everything because their nervous systems are overwhelmed. They're living in a state of flight or fight. You can live in that forever. And that's why people get sick and die early, get cancer. Lots of things cause cancer, but our organs, you know, get impacted when this nervous system gets tight. And inflammation abounds. And that is a cause of many diseases. Others underreact to everything because denial feels safer than grief, right? Neither response is supporting freedom in the way that we're supposed to understand it in this society. Accurate attunement means we feel what is happening without letting the feeling consume our discernment, our capacity to think clearly. We let the body register the violation, but we do not surrender our capacity to choose. So grief is part of the release phase, and we must grieve because something substantial has been taken away from what we thought the society was and the progress we thought we were making. So grieve, be angry, and be disturbed, right? But do not confuse those feelings with powerlessness. The point of seeing clearly is not to collapse. What can I do, right? The point of seeing clearly is to stop investing spiritual energy in illusions that were never protecting us. We were living a lie. A lie. This is, as I said, a wake-up call to those people who are in dream world, snoring, or walking around with the eyes closed. Wake up. It's not a cute wake-up call. It's not a motivational one. Come on, we can do it. This is the kind of wake-up call that shakes the nervous system because it forces a confrontation with what many people hoped they could avoid. The country is showing us something about itself. The question is whether we will keep asking it to become the fantasy that we were given in our schools, in our churches, or whether we will finally respond to what the reality keeps revealing. For those of us doing spiritual work, this moment demands maturity. It demands that we stop treating spirituality as private comfort only. Prayer matters, meditation matters, energy work matters, intuition matters. But if our spiritual practice does not sharpen our relationship with what's happening in this 3D reality, then it is not liberation. It is self-soothing inside a burning room. So the power of release is about moving from a closed fist to an open hand. A closed fist grips what it fears losing. In this context, the closed fist may be gripping the belief that the system is safer than it is. It may be gripping the need to be surprised because surprise protects us from admitting that the signs are already here. It may be gripping respectability, comfort, or the hope that moral ethical crisis will resolve itself without too much disruption. The open hand does not mean surrender to harm. It means that we stop holding the lie. The open hand receives truth. An open hand can join with others. An open hand can build, protect, organize, bless, confront, and create. That is the spiritual difference between collapse and release. Collapse says nothing can be done. Release says I will stop giving my life force to the illusion, the lie, so I can place it where it actually has power. And it's not out there. It's in here. Not that we're being isolationists. No, we have to realize that we have the power to do. Look, I don't want to leave us in despair, but this is a sober moment right here, right? I don't want panic, because a few years ago, I would have panicked. Even though I thought it was not going to serve us anyway, I would have panicked like, he's racist. But I want to leave us in recognition, not in the fantasy that one institution, one leader, one court, or one election will save us from the deeper work. The deeper work is learning to see clearly, grieve honestly, release what keeps us passive, and reframe our relationship with power. Because what is happening now is not only about the Voting Rights Act, it is about whether we can attune to a reality without losing ourselves. It is about whether collective trauma will keep us bracing in place or move us forward toward disciplined, embodied, spiritually grounded action. I ain't talking about religious action. I'm talking about spiritually grounded action. It is about whether we will keep looking at the polished face of the nation or finally confront the decayed picture in the attic that is now sitting at our dinner table. Once we see it, we cannot unsee it. We can choose not to do anything about not being able to unsee it, right? We can close our eyes again. We cannot unsee it. The question is, what will we do with that sight? Yeah, that's what I had to say today. What did we expect would happen? What is right? So look, If you got something to say about what I'm talking about in any way, shape, or form, comment, right? Comment on what your thoughts are about our collective sleepwalking and the lie that is what we thought the society would do for us. Comment. And also like and subscribe. I asked. The like and subscribe will increase the algorithm something. And that's what, if you believe that things are being said that other people need to say, you'll like it and subscribe and subscribe. And get notifications too. I do live streams at least 3 to 4 times a week. So comment, like, and subscribe. All right. Now, usually I have my sell points at the end of the video, but I'm not going to do it today because not that I'm an aggrieved state or this is a sad day, but you know, it's not about keeping you here to sell you things today. It's really not about that any day, but I got to make some money too because this is my job. I don't even ask for donations, which I should. But I thank you. This is almost a 2-hour type of live stream. I appreciate whoever sat with this today or will sit with it later. I thank you all, beautiful souls, for entertaining my thoughts. And again, if there's something that resonated with you, leave a comment. I mean, like, what would be some next steps? We know everything's a lie now. So what's next? We gonna go back to the Band-Aid? Thank you all. I appreciate your time. This is Dr. Akila Ka Ma'at, finishing up my life. And I wish you a phenomenal rest of the weekend. And I ask you right now to jot down what you recognize in this moment, to evaluate what feelings you're having about this moment, and then to think about how you can reframe what it is that's happening, the patterns that may have been established in your life in regards to this lie of racism we have operating here. How are you going to reframe? How are you going to grieve what you were attached to? These patterns you have affirmed and supported in this society, the affirmations of collective trauma being situated within our institutions and in our day-to-day. And then how are you going to reframe things? Not just so you can survive, but reframe things in a way that can have an impact on these patterns. Everybody can do it in their own way, right? Thank y'all. Have a blessed day. I appreciate you, beautiful souls. Thank you.